Welcome back to Student Hub Live. This session is about building your confidence and growing your skills. And I'm joined by Peter Redman, who's been at the Open University for nearly 30 years in a variety of roles. You've been a tutor or an associate lecturer and a central academic in the sociology department. And you have written good essay writing, a social sciences guide, so you know heaps about study skills. But Peter, we've been talking to a lot of new students here who are very nervous about starting their studies, and they're really excited as well. But the first thing I wanted to ask you was, is it normal to feel a bit nervous when you're starting?
Well, I think when you're starting anything, it's very likely you're going to feel nervous, and that's perfectly acceptable. Or, you know, if you're not feeling nervous, then it's a bit worrying, really, because it's new. So it's perfectly normal to feel nervous. Yeah.
So I guess a lot of it is this fear of the unknown, you know. I've heard students say something like, you know, will I be able to do it? What if the other students are better than me? You know, there are all these questions. What are some of the things that you typically hear from students when they're just starting out?
Well, I think there are things you've just said. The really common ones are, am I going to be clever enough?
Yeah.
Is everyone else going to be more clever than me?
Yes.
Am I ever going to learn all the OU jargon? Will I ever find my way around my module website? Will I be able to keep up with the study material?
Will I ever find a good cabbage cake to eat?
all those kind of things.
Important. Yeah. So to what extent then is intelligence an issue? Because this is something we've been talking about lately. So many students say, oh, I'm worried that I'm not going to be bright enough to do it. And one of the things we've been saying is actually, you know, so much of success is about resilience, about doing this stuff, getting things in on time, and it's not necessarily about how talented you are, it's how hardworking you are often.
Yep, I would absolutely agree with that. The thing I would add to it is that really, when you're starting out, when you're studying, the thing to remember is that you're studying, well, one, that you're studying for yourself. So not to compare yourself to other people, to have your own goals and standards. But the second thing is also that it's a pass mark is a success. So when people start out, I think, and probably when people finish as well, some people, but a lot of people will think that they have to get top marks or they have to get marks above 70 or something like that. Well. If you can do that because you're bright enough or you've got enough time or you've got enough experience to do it, then great, you know, go for it. But that's not a pass. A pass is around 40%, and that's success. That's all the OU expects of you. So anything more is icing on the cake.
Brilliant. And many of our students will know that at level 1 it doesn't really matter, you just need to pass, and your degree classification is made up of the later years when you're a bit more specialised and know what you're doing, so it's a really lovely learning platform to start off with. Now the OU understands that many students do feel nervous, but there's lots of support for them. There's tutors, there's student support teams. Do you want to talk us a little bit around some of those things and how they might help students to actually grow their confidence and know that they can do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I would say is that you have a personal tutor. Everyone will know this by now, but your personal tutor is really, really important. And I remember when I was a personal tutor, students would sometimes say to me, is it okay to contact you? And I'd say, yes, please contact me, because the worst thing being a tutor is the student who you never hear from. And you wonder if they're doing okay, and particularly if they're a bit late with an essay or something like that. Yeah. And you try and contact them and they don't answer. That is really worrying for you as a tutor. So you really, really want to hear from students. Yeah. It's very nice when they contact you. And particularly if they've got problems, you know, whatever it is, whether they don't understand something in the teaching material or whether they need a bit of extra time for their essay or whatever, it's great to hear from them, and better to hear from them than not. Yeah. So I would say do absolutely use your personal tutor as your front line of support, and that can help you with a whole range of things and help you progress, definitely. You've also got your student support team, who you just mentioned, and they're there to help you with sort of non-academic problems that you might have, but that you could do some help with. So, for example, if your life circumstances change and that means it's more difficult for you to study, then you can contact your student support team and ask them what's kind of help they can actually provide.
Now, you've developed modules, and so you know very well how the learning is scaffolded, because we don't assume that students come in being perfect essay writers, for example, or knowing how to take notes. So many of the skills are built into the materials, so people are going to pick things up as they go through, so they don't need to be perfect. And that can sort of sometimes allay a bit of anxiety, because many students think that they've got to come to the OU being good enough to do things. So how does that all work, and what sort of things would you say to reassure students early on that they're going to learn some of these important things?
Right, how it works is there's an array of things. The first, most obvious thing is that the teaching material is pitched at a level that we hope is right for people who are starting out with their studies. So people sometimes, when you start a degree, as you just said, sometimes people think, oh gosh, it's going to be terribly, terribly difficult, I won't understand anything. Well, we try to avoid that by teaching you the content and concepts and ideas that you actually need at a level that's appropriate for you. And then gradually it builds up. So once you've got that foundation with the basic arguments and ideas at a more simple level, then it becomes more sophisticated later on when you're ready to cope with it. So that's one thing. But there's also, of course, study skills themselves. So we could take a really obvious examples like how to write notes. Well, not everyone learnt how to write notes at school. If you did, maybe it was a long time ago and you've forgotten. So we teach you how to write notes, how to take notes from the study material, how to assimilate it, and then how to reproduce it in your written work. Another example would be how to write essays. So, of course, not everyone knows how to write a social science essay. Maybe you were taught how to write essays at school and you remember, but maybe they weren't social science essays and they're a bit different. Yeah. So we teach you how to write social science essays, starting again at a very simple level with just little building blocks so that you develop those skills for yourself.
And like you say, even if you do come to the OU with really good essay writing skills because you've done it a lot before, sometimes it is a bit different. Like you say, social science essays look very, very different to English literature essays. They are undermined by very different principles, and so it's important to actually meet them anew and think, what is this trying to do? So confidence is something that you've mentioned before, Peter, and I'd like to talk about this and ask what we mean by confidence. So we've asked people at home what they mean by confidence, and then I'd like to talk to you about it because it's a key issue, I think, for so many people. So let's see what our word cloud says. So it's about being can-do, being able to sort out a problem, knowing what to do, lack of nerves, understanding, courage, readiness, it's okay to get it wrong, and belief in the self. So some of these things are what people associate with confidence. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, they're all really good, but I particularly like the first one, which was it's okay to get it wrong. Yeah. And because that would actually be my starting place. So I think lots of people think when they hear the word confidence, what they'll think is, oh, it's about being best or about getting top marks or, being better than everyone else. Actually, it's more about starting from your own starting place and being prepared to get things wrong and being prepared to experiment and not judging yourself against other people.
I was talking to some tutors earlier today and they were saying their students say, I'm really sorry to have to ask you this, but... And then they'll ask them something they don't know. And she was saying, well, why would you know? You've never done it before. We don't expect you to know that. It's very sensible to ask. You can find out in a number of different ways. I often think the quickest way to find something else is to ask somebody who knows, other than try and read it myself somewhere if I can't navigate, for example, that website or something like that. So it's okay not to know everything, isn't it?
No, absolutely. And when I was a tutor, I used to tell my students, the first thing I would tell them was, you have a right not to know things. And I would say, repeat this in front of the bathroom mirror 3 times every morning. I have a right not to know. Yeah. And it sounds a bit silly, but actually there's something incredibly liberating about it once you realise that, of course, when you start something new, you're not going to know everything. Yeah. No one expects you to. And it's okay, therefore, to ask for help, to make mistakes and to learn from them.
Yeah, it's like Jess, who was here before talking about assessment. She knows loads about a particular period of 2 years from 400 to 420 BC, but not much about all the questions we had in the quiz today. And it's interesting because I think the more you learn, sometimes the more mindful you are that you don't know things, then it's okay not to know things. But the things you are being assessed on are the important things to know. So it's about prioritising, I guess, those areas and being kind to yourself.
Being kind to yourself, absolutely. Because I think for some people, I would have included myself in this, cultivating a beginner's mind, which one of those phrases you hear sometimes, is actually quite difficult. So allowing yourself to be someone who's at the start of the process and saying, okay, I'm at the start of the process, I'm not going to know everything, that's fine.
So within this confidence building thing then that's going on, we've identified that it's okay not to know things, but also that the OU teach you things. And I guess within that whole idea of that we all do things slightly differently. I mean, note taking is one example you've given. I know people take notes in various different ways. Experimenting and finding out what works for you is also really important. And sometimes that can build your confidence when you find something that's working for you.
No, absolutely. So I think once you've allowed yourself not to know things, what you're liberated to do is actually go out and experiment. And particularly in your first year, when the initial modules that you take, this is something that's incredibly valuable to do, although it's a resource that you should take with you throughout your studies as well. But just throwing yourself into it, thinking, I'll just see how I do, and finding out what you're good at and what you're bad at. So you'll surprise yourself almost inevitably. There will be things that you think you're going to be able to do, but actually much more difficult than you imagined. There'll be things that you thought you'd be terrible at, that actually your tutor's telling you in the feedback she or he gives you that, oh, you're doing really well at this. And there'll be things that you think you're doing terribly, but actually for the stage of the study you're at, that they're perfectly good enough. They're what's expected of you for your first years of study.
Many of my students will identify very clearly the things they're not so good at, and sometimes they won't be very kind to themselves in those things, and they'll have higher expectations than are necessary for that level. But something I think that we all struggle with is identifying our strengths. But that's really important because I guess you don't need to worry about stuff you're doing well. How would you recommend students identify then what they are good at?
Well, I think I would underline that that is a really important thing to do, to identify your strengths as well as your weaknesses, because we all tend to focus on our weaknesses, and it's, at a basic level, it's good to remind ourselves that we are actually doing some things well. How do you do it? Well, one of the most important resources is going to be the feedback that you get from your tutor. So one of the things your tutor will be doing is telling you, in this piece of work, you did this really well, and that's why you got these marks for doing that thing well. And probably it's a tendency to sort of skate over that and get to the bit where the tutor says, however. So you glide over that bit and then concentrate on the bit that you didn't do so well at. But actually, spend some time looking at what your tutor has told you you've done well and take it in. Partly because that will build your confidence, will underline that you are doing things that you're expected to do, but also because you want to be able to take that away with you.
And replicate it again.
Replicate it again, and reflect on it and think, okay, I was doing this well, I did that well because I was doing X, Y, and Z.
Well,
you can build on
that, isn't it? Because I think sometimes we take a comment and say, this is a really nice introduction. What was nice about it? What can I do? How can I take some of those things onto another essay, for example, that I'm going to have to do again?
Exactly, yeah. So those things that you've done well, that kind of feedback actually allows you to build on your strengths. It's not just about repeating it. It allows
I guess
you
you
to develop
become
it.
then, in a sense, mindful of what you're doing and more aware, I guess. We've talked about not having to do a perfect job all the time and that sometimes you'll just get a good enough assignment in. But I guess when you're your own critic and you can recognise what you need to develop and what you're doing well on, you'd get more confidence because you could say, well, hey, I know I'm doing this well. I sort of expect to get about this. And it's not just a chuck it in and see what happens. I think that can be really overwhelming sometimes, is when students say, I put in a piece of work and then I just wasn't sure why I got the grade I did, because they're not mindful of those strengths and limitations that they're developing.
No, absolutely, I agree. And what you've just said makes me think sometimes with your tutor's feedback, I mean, students have said this to me, they still weren't sure what it was that they were doing right or what it was they'd done quite wrong, despite the feedback that they've got. And then, of course, it's a good idea, just like I said a moment ago, to actually contact your tutor and say, could you talk me through this? And sometimes it will then click what it was that you were doing well, what it was you were doing less
Talking
well.
is sometimes different to writing, and you can understand things in different ways, can't you? Exactly. One thing I wanted to ask you about, Peter, is about students having their own goals, because you talked about sort of, a pass being success, but very often, like you said, sometimes students think it should be this or it should be this, or so-and-so's got this. What advice would you give our new students about where to set their expectations?
Right. I would say, and the most important thing about this is that you should measure yourself against yourself, not against other people. Okay, so there are always going to be people who are better than you are. It doesn't matter. Well, you should set your goals according to yourself and the conditions of your own life. So it could be that you're absolutely brilliant, but you've got very, very limited time because you've got small kids, you've got a very demanding job, you've got a mother who you have to look after at the weekends, whatever it is. So in those circumstances, it's best not to beat yourself up about the fact that you're not going to get the grades that you might do in other circumstances. Of course, it's frustrating, but these are the conditions of your life, and think the mark I'm getting is a really good mark given what I can actually achieve. So setting your own goals, not comparing yourself to other people, I think is really important.
You've got a lovely example to end on about keeping things in perspective, which I think is really neat.
Well, this would be the other thing I would say, is keep things in perspective. And this came to me because I was reading recently about this apparently absolutely lovely academic from Oxbridge, an English literature academic called Eric Griffiths, who I'd never heard of. But he used to write these most hilarious letters to his students at the end of term, just before they were about to take their exams, where he would say that, remember, an exam isn't a judgment from God. Your parents will still love you. Your friends will still love you. And this is just a nice thing to remember, to keep things in perspective, that if you don't do as well as you wanted to in a piece of work, or as well as you thought you deserved to do, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. You're still you. Your family still love you. Your friends still love you. Actually, it doesn't matter.
And we asked you, Peter, to bring one thing in to tell students something about their studies, and you've chosen a banana, which is good because we really like food here, although we do prefer cake, I will be honest with you.
Yeah.
Why have you bought a banana?
Well, here it is.
Yeah.
That's the banana. And I brought it to underline the fact that it's okay to make mistakes. So, of course, things are going to go wrong. You're going to slip up on the banana skins.
Okay.
You're going to slip up on those banana skins from time to time. And that's okay. It doesn't matter. And you can learn from your mistakes. If you never made mistakes, you'd actually never learn anything. And why would you be here if you weren't going to learn?
No, absolutely, absolutely. And sometimes doing those things that you're really scared of, like, for example, failing something, it can be so liberating to think, well, I've done that. It wasn't the end of the world, and actually I can just reset it or do it again. And then you don't have to worry about that ever again.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Peter. That's been absolutely fantastic. Lovely way to end our show today. Aisha and Michelle, how's everyone at home?
Great. We are absolutely fantastic. We've been really productive by, watching Student Hub as well. Victoria's worked out a lot to do with her assignment, which I'm really glad about. And a lot of us think that she's doing extremely well.
She's so clever, isn't she?
She is. She's doing amazing. She's doing chemistry and maths at the same time. And you did point out, though, that baking is like chemistry.
It is. It's
in that
absolutely
case,
chemistry.
I'm a chemistry master. I'm not sure anyone else would agree if they tasted what I baked. But
And Alan was talking about going to a face-to-face tutorial and being the only one there, and was nervous at first, but when he got relaxed, he had a brilliant tutorial and they focused on all the things that he was working about. And Tala said it's very helpful, thank you very much, to remind yourself of these things about being kind to yourself, being gentle with yourself. And we all love have a right to not know. That's all love.
Definitely.
And Sharon has says that makes her think of a bathroom mirror with post-its all over it. But she does have a document stand and Sharpies, so she's going to take to that with it. And Libby said that she loved the bucket tip and that was made it worth coming today. So great job to the students. And I must say, it made me think of a song. I don't know if you know this song from the Wombles, probably at 1976. Ooh la 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 la, hey banana, don't you slip on my skin. Ooh la 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 la, hey banana, womble up the rubbish and put it in the bin.
I know Victoria's a bit concerned about the banana on the table after our discussion with the law school earlier as well. So
Fake weapon.
we'll see what they think next time, if it's an imitation gun or anything. Well, it depends on the situation and your intent, though, doesn't it? I think that's what we
It certainly
decided.
does. And Beverly says that she loves Student Hub Live because it has cake.
Good. Well, that's a good enough reason for me. We've had a lovely day so far, and thank you to all of those people who've been coming along, who've come to other events to welcome new students. If you're a new student, I hope that we've filled you in on some of the things that you need to know as part of your studies. We do a lot of things here at Student Hub Live, and our whole aim is to try to scaffold and develop academic community. And we do that in a number of ways, from sessions like this, and there's heaps on our YouTube channel that you can watch, but we also do workshops an hour long in Adobe Connect, and I'm sure that some people in the chat can fill you in on how they work, and you can also visit the Student Hub Live website for a sneak preview. But coming up, we've got effective online communication skills. That's this week on the February the 5th. On the 13th, we've got essay planning, and then the week after that, we've got essay writing. So those will be really useful workshops if you've got an assignment coming up that involves an essay and you're not quite sure about those aspects. But they're also a really nice way to meet other students and chat to each other and spend a bit of time focusing on your studies and developing one specific skill at a time. We've also got a mailing list you can subscribe to, and then you'll find out about the events we've got coming up. We typically have at least one thing a month on, so you can come and join us and choose the options that apply to you. Many of our events are ticketed and limited in space, so make sure that you get your space booked on that as soon as you possibly can. We hope you've enjoyed the discussion. Please do vote on that and let us know if you'd like to come to another event in the future. HJ, Michelle and the other people you've had on the hot desk, thank you so much. You've been absolutely brilliant. But thank you at home as well for reassuring each other, sharing your advice and coming along and talking about cabbage cake again. It's been a really wonderful day. That's all from us though for now, and I hope to see you at another event very soon. Take care.